Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Draft Room. This is the NFL Draft podcast of the Packernet Podcast Network. If you'd like to call in, if you'd like to participate in the show, the phone number is 608-561-3243. All right, so we're going to pick up where we left off yesterday. Again, the idea being we're going to look at some of the shakeups that have happened, some of the changes that teams have made, and how that might impact them throughout the draft. Obviously, there's one major correction we're going to have to make here, and that is looking at the Baltimore Ravens, or better yet, I don't think we've gotten to the Ravens yet, but the Las Vegas Raiders. They obviously, first of all, did not pick up additional draft capital. Actually, we did get to Baltimore because they're at 14. But as of right now, the Las Vegas Raiders have Max Crosby as their pass rusher. Latest I've seen is the plan is to continue on that path. Very early, so who knows how these things can develop. But there's definitely some skepticism that Crosby ends up getting moved at this point. I know the focus is on the Ravens being scumbags, but if they legitimately found something medical that they don't like, there's a good chance that he's going to stay exactly where he is. But at the end of the day, the Raiders have done quite a bit to upgrade their team so far. There's a pretty hilarious conspiracy theory that they knew that Crosby was all jacked up and was going to fail the medical, sent him over to Baltimore so that Baltimore thought they didn't have the money to pay Tyler Linderbaum so that they can swoop in, grab Tyler Linderbaum, and then when they realize, oh, shoot, this guy's no good, they're like, okay, fine, I guess we'll take him back. Oh, shucks, you mean he's got some serious... Oh, that's my bad. I guess we missed that. Sorry about that. But kind of a weird situation. I've been saying stuff like this in regard to the Packers as well, but as far as, the Ravens have always been sort of a first-class type of organization. They do things the right way, et cetera, et cetera. The Raiders, obviously, not quite so much. The Raiders right now are looking like the first-class organization. They're going about things the right way. Everything seems in order. They're building a decent-looking team. They've got some work to do, but it's looking good. Then Baltimore is the team that's doing things that are just completely underhanded, that are just incorrect. They're not drafting properly. They're throwing a bunch of money at things, and then they back out of deals, and then they go get some other old, washed up, not really washed up, but old freaking edge rusher that's only going to last for a little bit of time. It doesn't feel good for the Ravens. I certainly would not be betting the farm on them having success anytime over the next, 4 or 5 years. But I guess for the most part, we're kind of right back where we left off. Do the Raiders now not need an edge rusher? No. I mean, there's a chance they still move him, and even if they don't, they're obviously trying to. I don't think that they see him necessarily as their long-term option or solution, so that doesn't change much. And then Baltimore went out and got their pass rusher anyway. They just have their picks back, so not a whole lot changes there. So, all right, let's pick up where we left off here. Detroit Lions at pick 17. For the Lions, I think the biggest shock change has been Taylor Decker. This isn't necessarily a trade deadline kind of a thing, but it is kind of recent news here. Taylor Decker's been, obviously something that you needed to keep in the back of your mind. He wasn't going to be around forever. But to have this sort of flare-up where he says, you know what, I want out of here, and they release him, little bit unexpected. Similarly, again, kind of expected, but you lose Alex Anzalone, cornerback Amik Robertson, defensive tackle Roy Lopez, and then wide receiver / returner Khalif Raymond. As far as additions, you add center Cade Mays, which is something. I think it kind of sets a floor for you. He's a decent center. Larry Borum is not the answer as a replacement to Taylor Decker. That's still something that needs to be addressed. Isaiah Pacheco is a solution. The expectation of losing Montgomery was very real, and it did happen in a trade. And so you need to go get somebody, and now this is something that is not as much of a question mark. But as far as the, first round, early round, high priority it doesn't get much bigger priority than the offensive tackle position right now. Everybody knows the cornerback position is pretty dire for them. You certainly want to find that number 2 pass rusher. You need defensive tackle help, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But from my perspective, and I've said this about numerous teams. I remember saying this about Dallas many, many years ago. Their strength was their offensive line. It was the number one thing that made them who they were. The same thing could be true about Detroit just 2 years ago, and it has completely imploded. Tate Ratledge might be a decent guard for them. Fingers crossed for them, obviously. Sorry, Packer fans, don't get mad at me. I'm doing a draft thing here, okay? And 32 teams. But compared to what this line was, looking at what it is now, from left tackle to center, I mean, maybe Mays is okay and Mahogany is okay. Really looked like Mahogany was going to be a thing in 2024 on those couple snaps that he had, but 2025 rolls around and he has a 41 pass blocking grade. I'm guessing the addition of a guard there is probably, the Scruggs edition. I don't know who starts in that spot, but I'm guessing you don't have a solution. So you need a left tackle, you need a left guard. Mays is, some duct tape at the center position. Linebacker is at least stunted with Jack Campbell being there. That guy just continues to get better and better. He was graded as the second best linebacker in football last year. You still need more than one linebacker, but, you can kind of get by with whatever. It's not a massive need. Probably still something you need to look into, though. The interior defensive line, again, a couple years ago, this was a strength. I know there's been a lot of injuries and whatnot. So maybe McNeil comes back stronger and better. He had a rough year, but it was, injuries. Maybe you're fine. I don't know. But I think the biggest change from my perspective is left tackle becoming a really big priority. By the way, I just updated the draft order, and then they went back on everything. So I'll have to update it again over at NFLDraftGrades.com, as well as the consensus rankings for everything over there. That's all updated. So if you're wanting to do some mock drafts, that should be much better off. Anywho, in regard to potentially what direction the Lions could look at offensive tackle, there's quite a few options, depending on how they feel about some guys. But if you're looking at, 15 to, you could even go 36. I know that seems crazy considering they're picking at 17, but just depends on how much you like them. That's an early second-round pick. That would be Blake Miller, by the way. That's basically the only one. If you don't like him, fine, forget it. But Monroe Freeling, Caden Proctor, and Caleb Lomu are the three guys that are right in that range. The Lions, I don't know for sure, but they seem to like their big, giant offensive linemen. Proctor in particular, but Proctor and Freeling certainly would fill that void. All three of them are left tackles. Lomu being a little bit smaller at 6'6", 308. The other guys being big boys. I don't obviously know if Freeling will be there, but if they're looking for the big dude, Caden Proctor would make probably the most sense. 6'7", 366, just absolute beefiness. Can you imagine making Penei Sewell look small? Penei Sewell is a massive human being. He's 335. Freeling, by the way, kind of that middle ground there, 6'7", 315. Still really big dude, but, not hulking, gigantic monstrosity of a human being. Minnesota Vikings. I think the biggest hit this team has taken seems to be on the defensive line. We'll see what happens with Jonathan Grenard. There's been talks about him possibly being moved. Van Ginkel, I know there was talk a while ago, plus he's like 31 years old, so we'll see what happens with that. They still have a lot of cap stuff to move around and everything. But the defensive line in general has been taking quite a hit. The fact that Van Ginkel and even Grenard at 29 are not super young, and we lost Hargrave, and we lost Jonathan Allen on the defensive tackle side of things, the defensive line it has to be, I shouldn't say it has to be, it is probably front and center. Offensive line is certainly a thing. However, especially if we're talking early rounds, we're really just looking at interior. because Darisaw and O'Neal are certainly fine. O'Neal, you're kind of in that, hey, he's 30, we should start looking long term, but I don't know that that's massive right this second. They also went and added James Pierre, a cornerback, safety Tavier Thomas. I'm not even sure who that is. Linebacker Eric Wilson, they re-signed. And long snapper Andrew DePaulo, they re-signed. They haven't done a ton, but the two actual additions they made were to their secondary. So that kind of further reinforces, not that they don't still need some help there, but if you like Pierre, at least as a baseline, you like Isaiah Rodgers as being a decent corner. Byron Murphy is not fantastic, but he's whatever in the slot. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, we've kind of dealt with some of the outgoing issues that we've had. We lost our longtime safety of the last 15 years or whatever, finally left. The focus, again, kind of recenters on what? That defensive line. If we're looking at the defense, all the incoming has been secondary, all the outgoing has been defensive line. Looking at, again, defensively. We also did lose a punter, so it's worth asking whether or not we would explore that. I don't know that anybody is draft worthy as far as punting is concerned. Eckley is currently at 328, which would put him well outside of the 7th round range, but who knows? Sometimes you just want to get a jump on guys, so you don't want to have to compete for them, so you use that 7th round pick as essentially a priority UDFA thing. I don't want to have to compete for the guy that I think is the best punter, so we're going to go out and do it. I know a lot of people hate that. I absolutely don't see any reason why you wouldn't do that if you need a punter. I mean, if you're fighting over, there's what, 3 or 4 of them that are considered decent, maybe that could possibly work in the NFL. There's 3 of them in the top 400, so let's just say there's 3 of them. You want to compete with 32 teams? Obviously, not everybody wants a punter, but a lot of guys, why not? Even if you have a punter, you're going to bring somebody in and just screw around, see what happens. A little competition couldn't hurt. I'm not competing. I'm drafting them. That's just me. Whatever. The unfortunate thing for the Vikings as far as defensive line, especially interior, is that especially outside of the first round, you're really struggling to find anyone that can contribute in any meaningful way. And maybe that's a little bit unfair, but if you're looking for a guy that can run, defend, and pass rush, or even just pass rush at all, good luck. Peter Woods is the top defensive tackle in this entire class. He had a 65 pass rush grade, 14 pressures on 363 attempts. What the heck even is that? 14 divided by 363. That is a 3.8% pressure rate. He never had more than 3 pressures in a game. He had 4 games with 0 pressures. He had sacks in only 2 games all year with 3 total sacks. This is your best defensive tackle. The other guy is Caleb Banks, who is your 6'6", 330-pound guy. If you're expecting that guy to be a pass rusher, I got a freaking bridge to sell you. He did okay. I mean, he statistically was better than Peter Woods, but he's not going to come to the NFL and be a pass rusher. He's going to be a run defender, and his highest run defense grade was a 68.5. There's your second best defensive tackle. So, I mean, it's a priority, but I think unless you need a 330-pound nose tackle, which, you could certainly use it, I don't know. I don't know what you do, man. I mean, I don't want to spend too much time here, but corner is a priority. It's a high, need. What am I saying? It's a high value position, but you kind of quote unquote solved for it a little bit so that you won't need to come in and do that. Okay, fine. How about edge rusher? Well, you could go edge rusher if you wanted to. I just feel like it's a little like we just took a swing at edge rusher not too long ago. And that's going okay, but I mean, how many times are we going to swing at one position and neglect everything else? Defensive tackle is a good option if there were any good options, and there's not. We could use help at linebacker, but that's not a good value in the first round. Safety, same thing. Tackle, we could try. We can maybe try to move somebody to right tackle, but he's going to sit because O'Neal is going to be our guy. You want to waste a first-round pick on a guy that's going to sit for a year, maybe two. Who knows how long O'Neal is going to be around. You don't want to use a first-round pick on interior. I mean, Kenyon Sadiq? Hawkinson is nowhere near as good as his namesake, and people would like to believe that he is. Do we go that route? Add another pass catcher to a team that doesn't have a quarterback or an offensive line, and it's a low-value position in the first round? There's no quarterbacks really to draft. I mean, I shouldn't say that. You could go Ty Simpson if you wanted to. You could add a wide receiver if you felt the need to do so, but again, it just seems odd when there's so many needs everywhere, wide receiver not really being one of them, and we don't have a quarterback, and we don't have an offensive line to protect our non-quarterback to get the ball to our wide receiver. So I genuinely, I don't know. I think usually I default to when a team is kind of flailing like this and needs some foundational things, we need to get some premier pieces at premier positions. And I don't care what we did in free agency. We need to draft a corner, or we need to draft an edge rusher, or we need to, I don't know what outside of that. Again, tackle, I'd love defensive tackle if there were better options. I don't like the defensive tackles in this freaking group, and I don't know why these guys are even first-round picks. All right, let's take a look at Carolina. Again, I got to speed this up. I always go too slow in the beginning because my brain is fresh, and then when I get fried, it's a lot slower. So the Panthers lost Cade Mays, who we just talked about, Rico Dowdle, and Ashawn Robinson. They've got quite a few additions, though. They added edge rusher Jalen Phillips. That's a big deal. That's a big signing, 4-year, $120 million deal. Eagles fans were not super thrilled about that situation. They added linebacker Devin Lloyd from the Jaguars, 3 years, $45 million. Kenny Pickett to be our backup quarterback. Luke Fortner to help kind of be a bridge for the Cade Mays situation. Stone Forsythe, the tackle, and then a bunch of re-signings down here. So as far as what's different, I think the priority shifts from defensive line to offensive line. You know, with Akwanu's knee injury, we lost Mays. We added Jalen Phillips. We added Lloyd to help with, I know it's not defensive line, but run defense, etc. I don't know that these are necessarily first-round issues because we're not going to replace Ekwonu. He's still only 25 years old. Maybe later on we're looking at interior help, specifically a center, third, fourth round range, whatever the case may be. Linebacker was a much bigger need prior to going out and getting Lloyd, who was the third highest graded linebacker last year. He's been great for 3 straight years. I think it just is very helpful at taming down the desperation. The desperation we need for a pass rusher, the desperation we need for a linebacker. Now we can kind of chill out a little bit and let the draft come to us a touch. We lost Rico Dowdle. Yeah, we still got Hubbard. We'll be, we'll figure it out. It's not a huge gaping hole that needs to be figured out. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back and talk about the Green Bay Packers. What has changed for the Green Bay Packers? Well, Gary's gone, Elton's gone, Nate Hobbs is gone, Quay Walker's gone, Enigbare's gone, Malik is gone, Romeo's gone. Again, a lot of these were kind of expected. I think, honestly, the biggest shift in focus has been away from offensive line, as much as that might upset me, because the reworking of Banks' contract has locked him into the left guard spot. Sean Ryan was signed 3-year, $33 million deal, and obviously Belton and Morgan are at least going to be given another year to secure those spots. So the offensive line essentially has been entirely secure. Now, as I said, that doesn't mean they can't go out and get a center and have him compete with Ryan or bring anybody else in. And if they win the job, they win the job. That's fine. But with the shifting focus away from that, the need kind of shifted to corner. However, they went out and got Benjamin St. Juste. He was, again, call it a fluke or not, it doesn't really matter, the 11th highest graded corner in football last year, and he fits Gannon's scheme a little bit better. So it at least takes a little bit of the need off of that, kind of putting the focus squarely on the defensive tackle group. This has been a big need. They lose Wooden. who was not necessarily a massive piece, but he was sort of their top run defending defensive tackle. He was probably their second best defensive tackle after Wyatt. So it just amplifies a bigger need while the other needs become lesser needs. So Packers do not have a first-round pick. And, again, defensive tackle class is not fantastic. However, I do think what they're primarily going to be looking for is more of a run-defending type of defensive tackle. And Gannon has been known for taking, not that he's necessarily in charge, and if Goot's not a fan, then he's not a fan, but if you're looking for those 330-plus pound, 325, 320, whatever, nose tackle types, one-tech types, whatever you want to call them, they are plentiful. As for the Steelers, the biggest thing that could help us out is if we knew who their quarterback was, but we have no further clarity on that as of right now. They lost guard Isaac Suamalo, Kenneth Gainwell, James Pierre, as we talked about the corner. Jonnu Smith was released, as well as offensive tackle Calvin Anderson. However, they did make some pretty big additions. First of all, they did extend Cam Hayward for a year. That's a big one. He is arguably the best defensive tackle in football. Re-signed a bunch of other guys like Asante Samuel, et cetera, et cetera. They brought in running back Rico Dowdle, 2 years, $12.25 million. They brought in cornerback Jamel Dean, which is a massive addition, 3 years, $36.75 million. With him and Joey Porter on the outside, that's a pretty solid duo. And then they brought in wide receiver Michael Pittman. So now you got Metcalf and Pittman at wide receiver, Freiermuth at tight end. You got the running back situation figured out. You got the cornerback situation figured out. And so I think the biggest shift with Pittman is we'll probably take that early wide receiver off the board. I don't see why we would be drafting Omar Cooper or whoever else. Wide receiver and Ty Simpson have been the biggest, most mocked positions. Outside of that, you've also got corner, Damani Jackson, Colton Hood. So they really did a good job of kind of diminishing. You could go Concepcion and say, let's just get 3 wide receivers. I think is certainly a potential option. But I think the elevated priority at this point is back to the offensive line, specifically that left tackle spot. Broderick Jones, we took him pick 14 overall in 2023. He's never really materialized. It just hasn't worked. If there's still a tackle available that works for us, I think that would probably make the most sense. If there's any clarity on Rodgers, we could consider Ty Simpson, certainly. Otherwise, as somewhat of a later need, linebacker is still a massive need for this team. Not really a first-round deal, but at some point that and defensive tackle are also going to need to be addressed. The Chargers lose guard Zion Johnson. He signed a 3-year, $50 million deal with the Browns. This is a team that has pretty serious offensive line issues to begin with. They lost Odafe Owe, Benjamin St-Juste. As far as additions, they did sign center Tyler Biadasz to help figure out that center situation. In addition, they brought back Khalil Mack, 1 year, $18 million. And then their signings have been tight end Charlie Kohler, which is 3 years, $24 million. Fullback Alec Ingold, 2 years, $7.5 million. And guard Cole Strange, 2 years, $13 million. The interior offensive line is still going to be a massive need outside of center. They did go out and get Tyler Biadasz, which is a good signing. The guards are still terrible. Strange helps nothing. I think edge rusher is probably still a pretty massive need. Khalil Mack is a 1-year Band-Aid. Losing Odafe Owe just kind of really speeds up our timeline for when we're going to need to go find somebody. We got 1 year to figure this out, and we have multiple edge rush positions that need to get figured out. So I don't know that a ton changes. You're still looking at trenches primarily. It's just kind of a shift in focus. Losing Owe again speeds things up. We bring back Mac to kind of take a little bit of pressure off, but it's still trenches all day. Early, you're probably looking edge, if at all possible. We could be looking at corner. Losing Benjamin St-Juste kind of hurts a little bit, but it was a need. It kind of remains a need. I don't know that they have a ton going on. I mean, Derwin in the slot is obviously fantastic when he's in that role, but outside of that, there isn't a ton going on there. As for the Eagles, quite a bit going on there. The loss of Jalen Phillips, as I mentioned, is a big one. They, from what I know, really wanted to bring him back. Ended up losing him to the Panthers. They lost linebacker Nakobe Dean to the Raiders, Reed Blankenship to the Texans, and Jahan Dotson to the Falcons. They did lock down Jordan Davis on a 3-year extension, $78 million. They also did quite a few signings. They brought back Grant Calcaterra, Michael Carter, the cornerback. They signed Johnny Munt to a 1-year deal. And then the big one was cornerback Tariq Woolen, or Reek Woolen, to a 1-year deal worth up to $15 million. So pretty wild that the team that already has Cooper DeJean and Quinion Mitchell went out and got Tariq Woolen, looking to have the most elite cornerback group in football. The A.J. Brown situation has not yet been resolved. That obviously needs to happen. As far as early on, the mock drafts are either Kenyon Sadiq or offensive line. None of that really changes. As far as for the rest of the draft, obviously corner is completely off the table. There's no reason to be investing in that outside of like UDFAs as depth. I don't know what we would be doing there. It is also worth considering with the loss of Jalen Phillips, are we looking at bringing in some edge help? There's also the question about Jalen Carter potentially getting dealt. I don't know if that's a real thing or what's going to happen with that, but now we're looking at a situation. You got Moro Ojomo. Carter didn't even have a super good year last year. Jalix Hunt, the 3rd-round pick, is just kind of okay. Nolan Smith off the edge. I mean, similar to what I said about some other teams, the trenches, offensive line certainly, but defensive line, I would say in particular, has been a calling card for the Eagles for a very long time. And you don't want to let that deteriorate. And they've done a good job of continually investing in it, but you could see a path for this to start going in the wrong direction if a couple things start going the wrong way. It's worth considering. Losing Dean at linebacker is not great, but Jihad Campbell and Zach Bond have been phenomenal at linebacker, so I don't know that it's a massive need. Safety, however, does become a bit of a need, losing Reed Blankenship. The safety situation with Makuba, unless he can take a step, is not fantastic. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. And honestly, the safety group is pretty solid. And it's definitely worth at least considering going that direction, whether that be in the 1st round, 2nd round, whatever the case may be. There's definitely options. Jaguars lost Travis Etienne, Devin Lloyd, Johnny Munt. Do not have a 1st-round pick. As far as additions, really nothing of note. I think the only thing that you really need to focus on is with the loss of Travis Etienne. The running back situation is pretty bleak. I don't know what the plan is there. They also lost Devin Lloyd, but they've got some decent football players playing at the linebacker position. It's still a need. I mean, Aloakun is a solid linebacker, but is also 30 years old. But then they've got Ventrell Miller, 4th-round pick, seems okay, hard to know. But running back, certainly, I don't even know who there's, is it LaQuint Allen? I don't know who their starter even is. I do see Jonah Coleman popping up a little bit on the mock drafts. It's kind of all over the place, to be honest, and they do have needs kind of that stretch everywhere. I mean, linebacker, safety, defensive tackle, edge, corner, interior offensive line, running back, wide receiver. You name it, the mocks have the Jaguars taking it. But I guess the positive news is that a lot of their real big needs are not necessarily premier positions. They need interior offensive line help. They need defensive tackle help, which is not a small thing, but it's not, whatever. Linebacker, running back. Assuming we believe that Travis Hunter is going to be a very good corner, I think they've got a pretty solid baseline, at least, of we think everything could be okay. But also, if we add somebody, it could help out a lot. we're good with edge. We add another one, wouldn't be bad. We can tolerate our defensive tackles. A really good one would be great. We could probably get by with our linebackers. An elite one would be awesome. Adding a safety. I think we're good with our safeties. You add one. It's kind of that way across the board. The only area I would be kind of concerned with might be the interior offensive line, but you go get a right guard and you're probably good. The two other guys in Cleveland and Hainsey are at least average. Wouldn't hurt to add some wide receiver help. Again, you don't really have a number one receiver, which is maybe where you could make the argument that would be a good investment in the first round to try to see if we can get a true number one, because at that point we're pretty well set. And then, get a defensive tackle or running back and a guard, we're fine. We'll be all right, man. Okay, let's take our final break. We'll come back and rip through the final 7, starting with the Chicago Bears. So the Chicago Bears haven't really done a ton. I think there was a lot more expectation of some big moves. So far, nothing massive. They've been active, but not necessarily in terms of any big moves, at least not yet. We'll see if the Max Crosby thing is back on their radar or what the case may be. Losses, they traded DJ Moore to the Bills, released Tremaine Edmonds, although they brought in Devin Bush to be that replacement. Drew Dahlman was the biggest one. That was the big shot to the gut for the Chicago Bears. Young center deciding to retire. That's going to create a pretty massive hole. They did go out and get Garrett Bradbury. I know some Bears fans are of the illusion that that's going to do something. That is just a Band-Aid. They also brought in Cam Lewis from the Bills, Kentavious Street from the Falcons, Khalif Raymond from the Lions, Neville Gallimore from the Colts, Devin Bush from the Browns, and Kobe Bryant from the Seahawks. That was their one big, kind of one big. Devin Bush was also a relatively big signing, but Bryant and Bush were the two big-ish signings. My assumption, well, I guess I don't know. They're both probably better run defenders than cover guys, so I don't know which one is a replacement for which, but they had a pretty good safety group last year, and so I don't know that that's necessarily an upgrade, but they at least patched that up so they don't need to worry about it. I think Cam Lewis is probably a pretty big downgrade from what they had. They did make some additions all along the defensive line with, Gallimore and Kentavious Street. I don't believe that really does anything, to be honest. I don't think that moves the needle in terms of need. The edge rush defensive tackle group is still a massive need for them. I'm not sure that losing DJ Moore moves the needle a ton, maybe a little bit, in terms of a specific type of player that you're going to be looking for to come in and do a specific kind of job. But you've got Khalif, you got Burden, you got Odunze, I think you're going to be okay for a little bit here. Again, defensive line doesn't change. That's still a massive need. I don't think a ton really changes for the Bears. Again, Bush I think is a solid signing. We got to see what he can do. He's had some injury issues throughout the years. He has certainly not been a very good linebacker every single year. Has been a good last couple of years. Obviously a scheme change. So we'll see if it's a good fit or a bad fit with what Chicago is doing. But that was never really a massive need for them. So, again, kind of the same situation that they were in prior to. For example, defensive tackle is by far the biggest draft. The number one thing being drafted for the Chicago Bears, and that remains. Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, maybe less so with the signing of Kobe Bryant. I think it still could be an option. Wouldn't be my preference, but if that's the top guy, you'd have a really good safety group at that point. Buffalo Bills traded away Teron Johnson to the Raiders for a 6th-round pick. They sent a 7th, so they got a little bit of extra something there. They released wide receiver Curtis Samuel, safety Taylor Rapp, cornerback Dane Jackson. As far as additions, they added D. Alford from the Falcons, 3-year deal, about Well, I don't know exactly the deal there. Quarterback Kyle Allen, punter Mitch Wishnowsky, tight end Dawson Knox, and then they gave an extension to center Connor McGovern. The major trade, as just mentioned, was DJ Moore and the Bears gave up a 2026 second-round pick. They get Moore plus a 2026 fifth-round pick. So that obviously is pretty impactful. But we did basically solve the wide receiver issue, which has been one of the biggest things mocked to the Bills is wide receiver. AJ Epinesa, Matt Milano still not signed, so the edge linebacker thing is a question. Yeah, Gregory Rousseau and Ed Oliver are solid, but outside of that, I mean, Javon Solomon is pretty awful. Deion Walker, the other defensive tackle, is awful. The linebackers, not great. So my guess would be you're going to see a shift from wide receiver drafts to edge drafts. Probably going to see that pick up quite a bit. There's still a ton of Concepcion mocks, which I don't know if that's still prior to, but I don't know what the dislike of Khalil Shakir is. I don't really understand that one, unless it's just a wide receiver label and they don't really think too much beyond that, I guess. I have no idea. The 49ers are, first of all, expected to release Brandon Ayuk pretty soon. They lost Jordan Elliott, who signed with the Titans. Kendrick Bourne, wide receiver, signed with the Cardinals. As far as additions, they did add wide receiver Mike Evans, a 3-year deal worth $60 million. Tackle Vidarian Lowe, offensive lineman Brett Toth. So they did do a little bit to try to stem the issues with the wide receiver situation. It is a short-term fix, as Mike Evans obviously is getting up in age. He is 32. He will be 33 years old this year. Had arguably his worst year of his career this past year. Beyond that, the Trent Williams drama is ongoing. No idea exactly what's going on with that. That would be a massive loss, even if it's not a loss, though. Clearly, this is something that needs to be resolved soon. It's just a matter of whether this becomes an immediate, urgent issue or if it's like, guys, we need to kind of hurry a little bit. In fact, the 49ers are just kind of in a really bad spot here. It's weird to say that Brock Purdy is like the best thing going for this team, but, their number one wide receiver is 33. Their elite pass rusher is, he's 28, which is not super old, but he's getting there, and obviously has dealt with injury issues. Kittle is 32. Their elite linebacker is 29. Christian McCaffrey is going to be 30 and has had injury issues. There is not a lot of young talent on this team. Their linebackers outside of Warner are bad. Their safeties are not great. Their corners are terrible. Their defensive tackles are terrible. Their edge rushers outside of Bosa, terrible. The wide receivers are kind of mid at this point, and that includes Evans, who probably will not last beyond a year. The offensive line is, 38-year-old Trent Williams, maybe. Colt McKivitz had his first good year. He's going to be 30 this year. Dominic Puny kind of took a step back. Blake Brendel is not a good football player at center. Connor Colby was a rookie 7th-round pick this past year. This team has completely imploded. This has been general manager malpractice. I haven't been monitoring the 49ers. I'm kind of just looking at them and saying, what the heck happened to you? So I don't know where 49ers fans are at on this situation, but it's also worth noting they lost their kick and punt returner to the Green Bay Packers. That was another thing that happened that I saw some 49ers fans are not super thrilled about. But, honestly, look, I think just about everything is on the table. I think wide receiver, given the other needs, becomes a significantly lesser concern at this point, which pushes to the forefront the defensive line. This has always been kind of a trenches kind of a team, but it's the trenches. It feels like it's dying from the inside out. But, you can't take corner off the board. You can't take anything. Safety, if that's kind of the top guy, whatever. I mean, it is a desperate need across the board, and even if it's not a need, it's rapidly going to become a need. Like I said, even if we only needed one edge rusher, are we not going to address the fact that Bosa is a couple years away from 30 and is coming off a really bad injury where we don't know if he's going to rebound from? I mean, he hasn't played since 2024. Maybe he'll be fine, but pushing 30? I don't know. I mean, in 2 years, I don't know if Bosa is the guy, Williams, Warner, Kittle, McKivitz, Evans. I mean, these guys are either gone or are probably in a decline in their play. McCaffrey, who is the one guy that is 28 or younger, and I'm going to say Bosa is older because he is above 28, 28.0 years old or younger, that is like an exciting prospect. Brock Purdy, that's the whole list. I mean, Michael Williams was a first-round pick last year. He was not good in the time that he played at all. Alfred Collins was a second-round pick. He had a 35 grade this past year. Absolutely appalling. 124th ranked defensive tackle out of 127. Tied with their other defensive tackle, C.J. West, who was 124th out of 127. He was a fourth-round pick. This is your first, second, and fourth-round picks on the defensive line. All of them were awful. I don't know, man. Just do whatever you got to do. I can't imagine anything really changes outside of just don't worry about wide receiver right now, okay? You got bigger needs. As for the Texans, the big loss for them was the trade of Titus Howard to the Browns for a 2026 fifth-round pick. Obviously creates some immediate need along the offensive line. They also released running back Joe Mixon and lost Tim Settle, who ended up signing elsewhere, I believe. I don't know if he actually got signed. Additions, though, they went out and did some things. They signed linebacker Jake Hummel, defensive lineman Logan Hall, defensive end Dominique Robinson, and then their big signings were offensive tackle Braden Smith from the Colts, 2-year, $25 million deal. I believe he's actually going to play guard. And then safety Reed Blankenship from the Eagles to a 3-year, $24.75 million deal. Blankenship had a really bad year last year. I don't know exactly why, but he's been a good football player for a while. Braden Smith, likewise, hasn't had a good last couple of years and is getting up in age, but at least will be a stabilizing force on an offensive line that could use a little bit of that. They also traded for running back David Montgomery from the Lions, which is a big get for them. I feel like the Texans since forever have had a need at running the ball. It's just been a thing that whether it's the offensive line or the running back or whatever, it's just been a struggle. So I think bolstering, especially the interior, going out and getting a hammer like Montgomery. They lost Juice Scruggs, but again, basically immediately replaced and I think upgraded that position. They did have to give up a fourth-round pick and a 2027 seventh-round pick, which is a lot. But this is a pretty solid option to go out and get for a running back. Texans now have 8 total picks, so they obviously had some capital they decided to move around. But obviously the running back need has essentially been eliminated. The offensive line need is at least shifted from the guard position to probably going out and getting the a tackle. Although we do have Ariante Ursary. I don't know how we feel about that. I guess he gets another shot, right? It's only been a year. He's a second-round pick. It wasn't great. It wasn't the worst. So maybe we'll just let him have the job and see how it goes. But I think they're in a pretty good spot right now to where there's not really any desperate need. I think safety's been addressed. Wide receiver's solid. Quarterback is set. Tight end running back is set. Offensive line could use some help if we come across it, but it might be okay. Edge is obviously locked down. Corner is pretty solid. The thing that I always love about when you set your team up this way is you allow the draft to come to you. Whatever comes in, this is the top guy. We're going to take him. I don't really care. There's some things, if it's an edge, it might be, okay, maybe who's the second best guy? Or a safety or maybe a wide receiver. You might want to look in another direction. But Defensive tackle, skeptical as I am, I think would make sense, especially with Sheldon Rankins being 32 years old. Linebacker, interior offensive line with, we'll see about Ed Ingram. He kind of took a step last year. I don't know if that's real or not. Jake Andrews on the interior is, okay. A lot of okay, but could be upgraded along the entire offensive line. I don't know where the team is in terms of we like him, we want to continue with this, as opposed to we can't wait to get rid of this guy. Moving on to the Kansas City Chiefs. The major trade was Trent McDuffie to the Rams for a 2026 first-round pick, a 2026 fifth, a 2026 sixth, and a 2027 third, on top of massive cap relief. So that's a big move. It also kind of feels like a move a team's making that's trying to kind of rebuild, which maybe is smart, but feels unfortunate for the Chiefs, where it feels like it shouldn't have come to that. But we shall see. We'll see if they can kind of turn this ship around quickly, because as we saw, they took a big step backward. Pat Mahomes, for whatever it's worth, as far as PFF grades go, it's been 3 straight years of decline. 92 grade, 90 grade, 83 grade, 76 grade. He's now dealing with injury stuff and was the 16th highest graded quarterback this last year. I've been saying for 2 years, everybody says Pat Mahomes as though the name means he's always going to be elite, but he just hasn't been in the last couple of years. The wide receiver situation is what it is. Kelsey is coming back, but he also has been declining those exact same years. It's almost as if Kelsey and Mahomes have been tracking almost exactly. I don't know if Kelsey is contributing to Mahomes or the other way around, but either way, Kelsey you got to assume it's one more year and then done. The offensive line has severely been crippled. Creed Humphrey is a phenomenal center, but outside of that, it's deteriorating. The defensive line is not exactly dominant. So, we'll see. I mean, it's a lot of draft capital. They can do a lot of things with that. They just need to hit. They did lose Pacheco to the Lions. They lost safety Brian Cook to the Bengals, cornerback Jalen Warren to the Rams, linebacker Leo Chenal to the Commanders, as well as releasing Juwan Taylor and Mike Dana previously. As far as additions, they added the defensive tackle Tonga from the Patriots on a 3-year, $21 million deal. That's a pretty big addition. He is a 30-year-old one-tech, a 338-pound run defender. So for whatever that's worth, $7 million a year. Safety Alohi Gilman from the Ravens. Pretty good football player. He's 28, so he's got a couple years left in him. So that was a pretty solid addition. And then running back Kenneth Walker was the big addition, where I'm sure they're hopeful that adding a truly elite running back to this unit can kind of get it back to its former glory or possibly better than it has been. I'm not really sure. We'll see how that pans out. Chiefs have 9 picks this year to play with. But I think cornerback, secondary, but cornerback in particular becomes sort of the critical. Vikings releasing Javon Hargrave. There you go. As expected. Anyways, losing Trent McDuffie, as you did, is obviously going to be something that needs to be addressed. Noel Williams seemed solid as a third-round pick, but that absolutely needs to be addressed. On the flip side, running back need obviously has massively deteriorated down to 0. Kelsey's return means we can at least pause the tight end desperation. Doesn't mean we don't try to find somebody in the mid to late rounds to see if he can come in and do something, but helps to kind of calm that down a touch. Well, you know what? I'm stupid. We already did the Chiefs. That's supposed to be the Rams we were looking at there. Well, that's all right. The Rams. The beneficiaries of the Trent McDuffie trade, obviously that tells you a lot about their cornerback situation, which is massively improved. Their tackle, Rob Havenstein, did retire. Cornerback Darius Williams, I believe, retired. Additions, long snapper Joe Cardona from the Patriots and cornerback Jalen Watson from the Chiefs. So McDuffie and Watson, both Chiefs cornerbacks, both of them very good cornerbacks, both of them now Rams cornerbacks. This is just a good freaking team, man. Holy cow. Cornerback, let's just say, is officially no longer a need for the Rams. I think right tackle did become a little bit more of a need. Warren McClendon filled in pretty admirably this past year, so maybe you're feeling good about that, but I think it's something to at least consider moving forward. But otherwise, the big story here would be the loss of the compensation, but they still have 7 picks in this draft, so I think they're going to be all right. Denver Broncos with pick 30, wrapping up the last 3 here. No big trades. They did release linebacker Dre Greenlaw, and they lost defensive end John Franklin Myers to the Titans. As far as additions, though, looks like it's almost entirely just re-signings. Adam Troutman, Justin Stranad, Alex Singleton, J.K. Dobbins. Actually, Dobbins would be new. But honestly, not a lot has changed here. You could elevate the need for edge or linebacker because of those losses, but otherwise, really just not a lot happened so far for them. As for the Patriots, a little bit more active over here. They've lost several people. Vidarian Lowe, the tackle. Tonga, as I said, the defensive tackle who went to the Chiefs. Tight end Austin Hooper went to the Falcons. Clavon Chason went to the Commanders. Jelani Tavai, the linebacker, was released. Linebacker Anthony Jennings was released. And wide receiver Stephon Diggs was released. As far as additions, linebacker KJ Britt was signed from the Dolphins. Fullback Reggie Gilman from the Bills. Draymond Jones was signed from the Seahawks/Broncos, 3-year, $40 million deal. Guard Elijah Vera Tucker, the Jet, signed a 3-year, $42 million deal. And then wide receiver Romeo Doubs from the Packers signed a 4-year deal worth up to $80 million, I believe. So Dobbs obviously is going to be your Stephon Diggs replacement. I think they've even said as much. Elijah Vera Tucker is a big addition to help out along the offensive line. That's going to slightly reduce the offensive line needs, but I think the entire interior outside of the one guard spot probably needs to be upgraded. Jared Wilson, 3rd-round pick. He's only had 1 year. Again, maybe we want to give him some time. Ben Brown at center, who I think is going to be center. We definitely need somebody in there immediately. But, again, big needs on the interior. They settled one of those. Wide receiver, basically not a need at this point. Romeo Doubs, Demario Douglas, and Keyshawn Boutte put you in a pretty solid enough spot there. Otherwise, things stay mostly the same. Draymond Jones does add a little bit, but not a ton. And finally, the Seattle Seahawks. Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, we've talked about a lot of their moves already because we've talked about every other team so far. But they obviously lost Kenneth Walker to the Kansas City Chiefs. Boye Mafe went to the Bengals. Kobe Bryant went to the Bears, and Tariq Woolen went to the Eagles. These are pretty big pieces that have been lost, such as the life of a Super Bowl champion. Guys want to get paid. You can't pay everybody. They did add back a couple, mostly re-signings. Drake Thomas, Josh Jones, Josh Joby, and Rashid Shaheed. Seahawks, unfortunately, not only did they lose some pieces, they only have 4 picks, which is the fewest in the NFL. They got rounds 1, 2, 3, and 6 in this upcoming draft. Running back probably is a need, but Zach Charbonnet is pretty legit, so I don't know how much we are desperate to fill the void at running back there. I think losing Boye Mafe might be a little bit of a bigger deal, especially with DeMarcus Lawrence being our other option, who's 34 years old. So I think edge has become a pretty big deal. Defensive back, losing Reek Woolen and Kobe Bryant. We did re-sign Josh Joby, but I don't think any Seahawks fan on planet Earth actually likes him. So that's something to keep in mind. The Kobe Bryant thing also, I mean, I feel like we might be okay. We'll see what happens with Mr. Okada. Obviously, Julian Love is a pretty solid safety, so they've done a good job of building up the depth. And I think, when you look at, for example, the interior offensive line, some other positions of need, I think the departures, especially at running back, are not really going to become massive needs compared to what are already needs. So, all right, I am going to leave it at that. Y'all have a good rest of your day. I'll talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.